The fog here doesn't move. It simply hangs, as though listening. Each morning, it smothers the headstones like a heavy curtain, wrapping the graves in silence, so thick it feels like breath held too long. The trees sway gently above the stones, but the air remains still, untouched. There's a strange calm to it, a calm that feels too deliberate, like something pretending to be peaceful. And every morning, I walk through it, not out of duty anymore. It's just become part of me, like breathing. My name is Father Elas. I'm 61 years old, and I've served this small parish for nearly 4 decades. I still get up before sunrise, unlock the chapel, and walk the grounds before Mass. It's a habit I never broke, even though the congregation has thinned, and the prayers echo longer than they should. I used to believe every word I spoke at the altar. Now I speak them for the sake of memory. I suppose it's my own kind of faith, to keep saying the words even when I'm not sure anyone hears them. I began noticing the footprints 3 winters ago, tiny bare imprints in the dew-covered grass. They wove between the graves, like a child playing tag. At first, I dismissed them. Perhaps a local family had visited, their child running ahead while they mourned, but they kept appearing, never too many, always small, always leading into the fog, and always gone by the time the sun cleared the mist. I started locking the gates at night. After the first few times, I told myself it was to keep vandals out, but I think deep down, I was trying to control something I didn't understand. The prints still came, sometimes more than one set. Sometimes I found tiny handprints on the chapel door, faint smudges on the old oak. I scrubbed them off without thinking, but they came back, always on the mornings when the fog felt heaviest. It was on a Sunday when I followed them. I didn't plan to. I was already dressed in my vestments, running late, but I saw the footprints winding toward the yew trees at the far edge of the yard, and something in me gave in. I stepped off the path, the wet grass cold beneath my shoes, and walked slowly, trying not to disturb the pattern. The prints ended at a hollow between 2 twisted roots. The earth there looked disturbed, the soil slightly darker. I knelt down, placing my hand where the tracks ended. The ground was warm. There were 6 small handprints in the dirt, arranged in a circle like they'd been sitting there, waiting. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't fear, it was something else, something worse. Recognition. I had stood here before, years ago, a different season, a different priest. In the 1980s, the town hospital lost funding. There was no place for unwanted births, no family to claim them. I performed rites alone, whispered prayers over linen-wrapped bundles. We weren't supposed to bury unbaptized infants in consecrated ground. There was debate, there were meetings. In the end, I chose silence. I dug shallow graves beneath the yews and never marked them. Told myself it was mercy. Told myself it didn't matter. They were gone, but they weren't. The fog remembers, the ground remembers, and now I dream of children crying, not loudly, but softly, like they're trying not to be noticed. I dream they are cold and hungry and calling me Father in a voice that isn't angry, only tired. I wake before dawn and whisper apologies into the mist. I place flowers at the base of the yew tree, though I don't know how many I should bring. Most mornings, there's a child's shoe on the chapel steps, always left, facing the door, always damp. I never touch them. I just unlock the doors and begin Mass. As usual, the pews remain mostly empty, but sometimes, when the fog thickens, I hear the faint echo of giggles behind me, brief, like breath caught in a smile, and for a moment, I think they've forgiven me. Then the silence returns, and it lingers all day. Rain never sounds right. In the graveyard, it doesn't fall. It whispers, like it's trying not to wake something. The crypt beneath the leaning elm tree hasn't been opened in nearly a century. It sits with its rusted iron door and sunken stone threshold, a mouth sealed shut. The others barely notice it anymore, but I do. Every time I walk past, it feels like something behind that door is waiting. I'm Father Michael, 47 years old. I came to this cathedral to disappear. In a way, after the scandal, the archdiocese offered me reassignment far from the city, somewhere quiet, a place with history. Penance, they called it. I accepted. I told myself it would be peaceful, and it is, but not in the way I imagined. It's the kind of peace that presses too close, that listens too long, a silence you feel in your bones, the kind that makes you doubt you were ever alone. The crypt first caught my attention during a storm. I had stayed late in the rectory, working through old records. The power flickered, and in the darkness, I saw a dim light through the chapel window, not lightning, steady, pale, and low to the ground. I stepped outside. The rain was falling sideways, cold and sharp, but the light was real, hovering faintly near the crypt door. I blinked, and it was gone. In its place, the scent of something sweet lingered, like dried roses and old perfume, a scent far too delicate for the weather. After that, I started noticing more. The stained glass on the chapel's east side, which faces the crypt, began to fog from the inside. Only that window. The door to the sacristy would sometimes be ajar in the mornings, though I always locked it at night. And then came the knocks. Always 3, always slow. They came only during rain. Never when I was with others. Never when I could prove they happened. The first time, I thought it was a trick of the wind. By the 6th or 7th, I began praying without meaning to, words spilling from me, as if I were trying to fill a space too wide. I asked the groundskeeper, an old man who's been here longer than anyone. I mentioned the crypt. He went silent, said only, "We don't open it." When I asked why, he shook his head. Because they told us not to, and they were priests too. The records were vague, sealed in 1928. The only name associated with it was a child, Genevieve. No last name, no date of birth, only a single line. Entombed following final rites. Do not disturb. I disturbed it. I waited for the next storm. When the wind howled and the windows trembled, I took the ring of old keys and walked out to the crypt. The iron door resisted. The key turned slow, protesting. Inside, the air was dry. Too dry, like something had soaked up the damp. Rows of stone niches lined the walls, coffins resting in deep alcoves. At the very back was a single small casket, half open, child-sized, empty. My breath caught. The stone dust on the floor was thick, undisturbed, except for a trail of bare footprints, impossibly small, leading out from the open casket and toward the door. I followed them, not with my feet, but with my eyes, counting each step. The last print stopped, just past the threshold, as if she had left, but never gone far. I didn't sleep that night. The hymns from the children's choir echoed in my head, notes I hadn't heard in years. One in particular, Sancta Lucia, soft and sorrowful. It was her favorite. That much I remembered. She had died during choir practice, collapsed without warning, her voice silenced, mid-note. They said it was her heart. They buried her quickly, quietly. Some said they were afraid of illness. Others whispered she had been cursed. But I read between the lines. There was doubt. There had been signs of breath, scratches inside the lid. I've woken up twice now to the sound of humming outside my door. Just a child's voice, soft and steady, until it fades. I don't open the door. I simply sit and listen until the silence returns. Now, when I light the altar candles before service, one refuses to hold flame, the one closest to the crypt-facing window. I replace it. I bless it. Still, it remains cold. The fog on the stained glass thickens by the day, and the scent lingers. Roses, dust, something old that never left. The chapel smells of lavender and mildew. Dust moves like breath in the beams of stained light, flickering gently, like it remembers movement. No one comes here much anymore. The village has thinned over the years. More funerals than baptisms, more names carved in stone than spoken aloud. The chapel stands as it always has, weathered and waiting. Some places don't crumble, they just grow quieter. But someone still comes. Someone always leaves a white flower on the third pew, left side. My name is Father Thomas. I'm 78, mostly retired. I'm not asked to give Mass anymore, but I come twice a week to this chapel because I don't know how to stop. After so many years, it feels more like a habit than a calling. I sit in the back where no one sees me, listening to the silence like an old friend. It's a gentle silence, one that forgives you, even when you don't forgive yourself. I started noticing the flower 2 winters ago, a single white bloom, fresh and without a vase, sometimes a rose, sometimes a lily, but always unbruised, always whole. It sat at the edge of the pew like it had been placed with care. At first, I assumed someone had come while I wasn't around, an old parishioner paying respects. But the chapel doors are locked most nights, and no one I've asked admits to leaving it. The flower began appearing more regularly, always on the same pew. The wood beneath it grew worn, as though someone had sat there for years. And one day, I noticed something stranger. The air around that spot was warmer, slightly, just enough to feel the difference when you passed by. Then there was the crying. I heard it during evening prayer, a low restrained sobbing from somewhere near the front. I rose, thinking perhaps someone had slipped in without my noticing, but the pews were empty. The flower was there though, damp, as if held by trembling fingers. The sound stopped when I approached, leaving only silence and the faint scent of lavender. I began to remember her after that. Margaret, she came every Sunday, always early, always sitting in that exact spot. Her husband died in a mining accident just after they were married. She never remarried, never missed a service, always wore gray, always brought a white flower. I had buried her 10 years ago. Heart failure, I think. She died during Mass, sitting where she always did. I was mid-sermon. She leaned back, eyes closed, and never opened them again, and I kept preaching. I finished the homily, finished the blessing, even led communion, while she sat quietly in death behind me. I thought it would be less disruptive that way. I told myself she would have wanted me to, but I knew even then it wasn't the right thing. I should have stopped. The woman had passed in my care, and I let the moment slip through me like water. Now, I sit on the pew beside the flower. I don't say much, just sit. Sometimes I feel a weight beside me, not heavy, just present, like someone leaning gently on the edge of the world. Once I thought I saw her reflection in the stained glass, though the light made no sense. Sunset colors at dawn. Another time, I came to the chapel just before dawn and found 2 flowers on the pew, one fresh, one dry and brittle, as if it had been left long ago. No one else sees her, no one else hears the crying, but I know she's there, not out of vengeance or sorrow, but because this was her place. This pew, this flower, these quiet mornings. I think she comes not because I wronged her, but because I never really noticed her, not until she was gone. Sometimes I apologize aloud, and sometimes I think I hear a whisper in response, not a word, just a breath of air that feels like forgiveness. I'll keep coming until I can't, and I hope when I'm gone, someone will sit beside her, even if they don't know why. The earth here is soft, like wet paper. It never resists the shovel. Some days it feels like the ground wants to be opened, like it sighs each time we dig. The wind rarely stirs on the hilltop, and even the birds seem cautious. The graves settle quickly, too quickly, as though something below is shifting to make room. I've never liked it, but I stay, because someone has to. My name is Father Lionel. I'm 55 years old. I was sent to this mountain mission 5 years ago. After a long, painful year in the city, I won't talk about what happened. Let's just say I lost people. Faith doesn't always leave in a moment. It peels away, like old paint on wet wood. I came here looking for quiet, but I've learned that silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's the sound of something waiting. Jacob's the gravedigger has been for decades. He's slow-moving, gray-bearded, always wearing the same frayed coat, no matter the weather. He doesn't speak unless he has to, and when he does, it's never idle. He hums as he works, low old hymns I barely remember. One day I asked him why. They keep the dead asleep, he said. At first, I thought he was joking, but Jacob doesn't joke. He means everything he says, even if he says it like a whisper. That's the kind of man he is. And when the ground started to sink in that one grave, the one near the old sycamore, he was the first to notice. We buried a man named Raymond there. No family, no one came to the service, but me and Jacob. I said a few words. Jacob lowered the coffin. Dirt was packed, the usual ritual. 3 days later, Jacob told me the grave had sunk, not just settled, but collapsed, like something had pressed upward from beneath. We dug again, thinking perhaps a shift in the soil. The coffin was still there, still closed. We refilled it. A week later, the ground had caved again. We opened the grave. The coffin was still closed, but the top was damp, not from rain. It hadn't rained in a week. We opened it. It was filled with water, clear, still water, like a pool, and floating in it, Raymond's body stared upward, perfectly preserved. But it wasn't his face. It was mine. I stumbled back. The image didn't follow me, but it burned behind my eyes. Jacob said nothing. He just hummed a little louder and began to fill the grave again. I tried to tell myself it was grief, or madness, or fatigue, but I knew better. That night, I dreamed of confession, not someone giving it. Me, kneeling, alone, in a booth, without a priest on the other side, speaking to nothing, begging for what I don't know. I only know I wept. I woke with the taste of earth in my mouth. The next morning, Jacob met me by the grave. He didn't ask if I slept. He only handed me a shovel and said, "It's open again." The coffin was empty this time. No water, no body, just soil. We didn't say anything. We didn't call anyone, we just closed it. That evening, I walked the grounds alone. I paused by every grave and whispered a name, if I remembered it. I don't know why. It felt like the right thing to do. When I passed Raymond's stone, the name had faded, only the date remained. I keep dreaming of that face, my face in the coffin, but it's not me anymore. The eyes are darker, the mouth never quite closes. Sometimes it moves, soundlessly, trying to speak, trying to finish a confession that was never heard. I think it was a man I turned away. Once, a long time ago, he came to the rectory drunk and desperate, told him to come back when he was sober. He never did. He hung himself that night, behind the cathedral. I remember thinking, I can't be blamed for that, but I was. Jacob still hums. I've started to hum with him. Under my breath, the tunes stay with me, even when I sleep. I don't know if they help, but I think the silence is worse. The bell has no tongue. It hasn't rung in over 50 years, not since the storm cracked its frame and shattered the wood beam it hung from. The villagers say it still chimes sometimes, only at night, and only when someone is forgotten. They whisper it like a folktale, an old fear wrapped in superstition. But I've heard it, not loud, not metallic, just a hollow, distant toll that hums through the bones, as if the earth itself is remembering something it shouldn't. My name is Father Jonah. I'm 62. I came to this town 10 years ago, after the last priest died of a stroke mid-sermon. They found him clutching the pulpit with one hand, the other pointing toward the bell tower. The bishop asked if I'd go in his place. I said yes. I needed the quiet. I needed something small, something I could carry. But this place, it doesn't feel small. It feels buried, like we're living beneath something that once rang loud enough to shake heaven, and now echoes only in absence. The graveyard here isn't organized. It sprawls. The oldest graves are marked with crooked stones, no names, just dates long worn away. At the far edge of the field lies the unclaimed section. No crosses, no flowers, just uneven mounds of dirt and the rustle of weeds. That's where the bell points, if you look from the tower, always to the nameless. No one climbs the tower anymore. The stairs are half collapsed, brittle with rot, but the door remains unlocked. Some things refuse to be shut away. I've climbed it 3 times. Each time felt like rising into a mouth that had forgotten how to speak. The first time was after a funeral. A child, unbaptized. The mother insisted on burial, even though the church would not officially recognize the rites. I did it anyway. I felt her eyes on me the entire time, not angry, expectant. I buried the child near the edge, close to the old stones. That night, just past 3, I heard the bell, one long, low note. I sat upright in bed, heart pounding. I told myself it was the wind, but it had a rhythm, a weight. The next morning, there was a feather on the chapel floor, white, delicate, wet at the edges. No birds nest in the tower anymore. The villagers say they left decades ago, just after the bell fell silent. The second time I climbed, I brought oil and cloth. I thought perhaps I could clean the mechanism, maybe even restore it. It was foolish, I know, but something inside me needed to try, to give voice back to the thing, meant to summon the living and honor the dead. The bell was cold to the touch, slick, even without rain. I ran my hand along its surface and felt an indentation, faint, almost erased. It was a name, not engraved, scratched, as though someone had carved it with a nail or a knife. A single name, David. I don't know who he was, but I've never seen that name in our burial records. That night, I heard the bell again. This time, 3 short chimes. I looked out across the graveyard and saw movement, a figure, slowly walking between the rows, pausing at certain stones. I didn't go out. I couldn't. Something told me not to. The next morning, I found footprints in the frost, bare feet, no drag, no limp, just deliberate steps that began at the edge of the unclaimed graves and ended at the chapel door. There were no other prints leading away. The 3rd time I climbed the tower was last week. The villagers had found bones in the woods, human remains, likely decades old. No one could identify them. They asked if I would give the bones a resting place. I did. I buried them alone, just before sundown. No rites, no name. I marked the grave with a simple wooden stake and a prayer whispered under my breath. That night, the bell rang once, and then again, and again. I counted 13 tolls, each one slower, deeper than the last. The tower shook gently with each note, though no wind stirred the trees. I climbed in the morning. The bell hadn't moved, but beneath it, someone had placed a small bouquet of wilted wildflowers, and tucked beneath them, a torn page from a hymnal, "Blessed are the forgotten." I don't ring the bell, but something does, and I believe it tolls not for the dead, but for those we fail to remember.